It was the golden age of daring men and fragile machines. Just weeks after the world had mourned its first fallen pilots, another aviation pioneer prepared to take to the skies of France. His name was Léon Delagrange, a sculptor turned aviator, a national hero, and one of the bravest men of his generation. On the morning of September 22nd, 1909, he climbed into his sleek Blériot 11 monoplane, confident and calm, ready to show the world what flight could be. But within minutes, that fragile canvas and wood bird faltered, and history recorded yet another tragedy. Delagrange's crash would become the third fatal accident in aviation history, proving once again that progress in the skies would come only through sacrifice. Third airplane crashed 1909, France. He was a man of two worlds, an artist and an aviator. Before he ever touched the fragile wings of an airplane, Léon Delagrange had been a sculptor, chiseling stone into works of beauty. Born in 1872 in Orléans, France, he grew up with a passion for art, creativity, and the pursuit of beauty in all forms. Yet, by the dawn of the 20th century, another form of beauty had captured the imagination of the world, the miracle of flight. Delagrange, like so many others of his generation, found himself drawn irresistibly toward it. What began as curiosity soon became obsession, and within a few years he had left his chisels behind and taken his place among the first generation of aviators. Delagrange was no amateur. By 1907, he had already made history by flying one of the early Voisin aircraft, earning a reputation as one of France's most daring and skilled pilots. Crowds gathered whenever he took to the air. He was tall, charismatic, and unafraid, a figure who embodied the romantic spirit of aviation. For the French public, still intoxicated by the novelty of flight, Delagrange became a national hero. He broke records for both distance and endurance, demonstrating that airplanes were not just fragile toys, but machines with real potential. Newspapers wrote of him with admiration, and his name was spoken alongside other pioneers like Louis Blériot, Henri Farman, and the Wright brothers. By 1909, aviation was advancing at a staggering pace. New designs emerged almost monthly, each one promising better performance, greater speed, or longer range. Among these was the Blériot 11, designed by Louis Blériot, who would later become famous for crossing the English Channel. Sleek and elegant compared to the boxy biplanes of the Wrights and Voisins, the Blériot 11 was a monoplane, its single pair of wings giving it a streamlined, modern appearance. To fly it was to stand at the forefront of progress, and Léon Delagrange embraced it with characteristic passion. On September 22nd, 1909, Delagrange prepared for yet another demonstration flight near the town of Croix-d'Hens in France. The day was calm, the weather fair, and once again a crowd had gathered. By this time, aviation had become a form of spectacle, drawing people from all walks of life to see these daring men defy gravity. But beneath the excitement was always an undercurrent of danger. The machines were untested, fragile, and unforgiving. Every flight was a gamble, and every pilot knew it. Delagrange approached his Blériot 11 with the calm confidence of experience. He had flown before, broken records, and survived the risks that claimed others. He checked the delicate wooden frame, the stretched fabric of the wings, the wires that braced the entire structure. To modern eyes, it looked impossibly frail, hardly more than a collection of sticks and cloth. Yet to Delagrange it was a marvel, a machine that carried him into the realm of birds. The crowd fell silent as he climbed into the narrow seat, strapping himself in with minimal harnessing. In those days, pilots had no parachutes, no helmets, and little protection. If something went wrong, there was only the earth waiting below. Still, Delagrange appeared composed, even smiling faintly as the small engine coughed to life. The propeller spun, the machine trembled, and with a lurch, it began its takeoff run across the field. As the Blériot 11 lifted into the air, a cheer rose from the crowd. There was always a thrill in seeing man defy gravity, a wonder that had not diminished despite hundreds of flights across Europe. Delagrange climbed steadily, circling above the spectators. The monoplane's lines looked elegant against the blue sky, its single wing slicing the air with a grace that suggested the future of aviation. For a few moments, everything seemed perfect. Then, without warning, disaster struck. Witnesses saw the aircraft shudder violently. Perhaps a gust of wind caught the wing, or perhaps the fabric tore under stress. Some later accounts suggested that part of the wing structure failed, unable to withstand the strain of flight. Whatever the cause, the monoplane suddenly lost stability. The nose dipped, the wings tilted, and in a horrifying instant, the machine went into a dive. The crowd gasped as Delagrange's aircraft plummeted toward the ground. At barely 100 feet of altitude, there was no time to recover. The Blériot 11 struck the earth with devastating force, splintering into fragments of wood and canvas. The impact was so violent that there was no hope for the pilot. Léon Delagrange was killed instantly. The silence that followed was deafening. Just moments earlier, the crowd had watched in awe as their hero soared overhead. Now they stared in shock at the wreckage, unable to comprehend how quickly triumph had turned to tragedy. Reporters rushed to capture the story, their words soon to spread across France and beyond. Another pioneer had fallen from the sky. Delagrange's death shook the aviation community deeply. He was not an unknown novice, but one of its brightest stars, a man whose name had become synonymous with progress. His loss was felt not only in France, but across the world, where aviation enthusiasts followed every record and every daring flight. In just over a year, 3 men had died in airplanes. Thomas Selfridge in 1908, Eugène Lefebvre earlier in September 1909, and now Léon Delagrange. The pattern was undeniable. Flight was deadly. Critics seized upon the tragedy to question whether aviation had any future at all. Was mankind playing recklessly with forces it did not understand? Were these machines simply too fragile, too dangerous, too unnatural to ever become safe? Yet for every skeptic, there were dreamers who refused to give up. To them, Delagrange's death was not the end, but another step in the painful march of progress. Each crash taught lessons about structural strength, control systems, and the limits of materials. Every wrecked machine became a classroom, every fallen pilot a teacher. For Louis Blériot, the designer of the aircraft, the crash was a bitter reminder of how much work remained. Just 2 months earlier, in July 1909, he had achieved worldwide fame by crossing the English Channel in the very same model of aircraft. That flight had made him a hero, proof that airplanes could go farther than anyone had dared imagine. Now, with Delagrange's death, the Blériot 11 faced scrutiny, but rather than abandon the design, Blériot and others refined it, strengthening weak points improving controls, and pushing forward. Within a few years, the Blériot-11 would become one of the most successful early aircraft used by militaries and enthusiasts across Europe. Delagrange's legacy lived on in other ways as well. He was remembered not just as a victim, but as a pioneer. He had been one of the first to show that aviation was more than a stunt. It was a field of real possibility. His record-breaking flights inspired countless others to take up the challenge, to build, to test, and to dream. His death was mourned, but his example continued to shine. Today, more than a century later, it is easy to forget the names of those early pioneers. We board modern airliners with little thought to the men who risked everything in the beginning. But every rivet, every safety standard, every test that ensures a safe flight is written in the blood of those who came first. Léon Delagrange's crash was the third in aviation history, but it was far from the last. Each tragedy carved the path towards safety, forcing engineers to learn, adapt, and build something better. When we remember Delagrange, we remember a man who began as an artist, shaping stone, and ended as an aviator, shaping history. He transformed from sculptor to sky pioneer, and in doing so, gave his life to the progress of flight. His story is not only one of tragedy, but of courage, the courage to climb into fragile wings, to face the unknown, and to believe that humanity belonged in the sky. The wreckage of his Blériot-11 lay twisted on the field that day in 1909, a symbol of failure to some. But to history, it became a stepping stone. From that crash would rise safer designs, stronger aircraft, and the relentless pursuit of the dream of flight. Léon Delagrange's sacrifice was not in vain. It was a price paid so that the miracle of aviation could continue, so that today we can cross oceans in hours, fly higher than mountains, and travel farther than he could have ever imagined. The third crash in aviation history was not just an accident. It was a chapter in the story of human progress, written in courage, loss, and the unbreakable will to rise again. On that September day in 1909, the world lost Léon Delagrange, an artist who traded marble for wings, and in doing so carved his name into the skies. He was not the first to fall, nor would he be the last, but his courage reminded us that progress is never free. Every safe landing today carries with it the memory of men like Delagrange, who risked everything so that others might fly without fear. The wreckage of his Blériot-11 may have marked an ending, but history remembers it as a beginning that proved humanity would not give up, no matter the cost. Because for every fall, aviation always found the strength to rise again.